A deload is a short period of reduced training stress. It's designed to mitigate physiological and psychological fatigue, promote recovery, and enhance preparedness for subsequent training. There are two types of deloading: pre-planned and auto-regulated. A pre-planned deload, as the name suggests, is scheduled into the training program in advance, typically every 4 to 8 weeks. It's used to proactively manage fatigue and reduce the risk of maladaptation, often after a high-stress training block. An auto-regulatory deload, on the other hand, is reactive and flexible. It's not scheduled in advance. Instead, it's based on the athlete's current physiological and psychological state, where lighter days can be used within a training block, guided by feedback from objective data and subjective measures. This makes it a highly individualized way to manage training stress and promote recovery. To better understand the role of deloading within a broader recovery strategy, let's explore how it compares to two commonly confused concepts: training cessation and tapering. First of all, deloading and training cessation both aim to reduce fatigue and aid recovery, especially after demanding training blocks, but the way they do this is quite different. Deloading reduces training stress, but training still continues, whereas training cessation is a complete stop. Training stress drops to zero. Deloads are short-term resets, planned or reactive, to maintain progress, whereas training cessation may be intentional, for example the off-season, or unplanned due to illness, injury or travel. Deloading helps preserve neuromuscular engagement and movement skill, while extended training cessation can lead to detraining, loss of strength and technical ability. During a deload, accessory lifts may be modified or removed while keeping core movements, whereas regarding training cessation, all structured training stops, though general activity may continue. In reality, the line can be blurred. For example, if an athlete stops lifting but continues aerobic work, that could count as both deloading and training cessation, depending on the context and intent. Now let's compare deloading to tapering, another concept it's often confused with. Timing is a key difference. Tapering happens just before competition. It's the final stage in a training cycle, designed to reduce fatigue and help the athlete peak for performance. A deload, by contrast, can occur at any predetermined point within the training program or reactively in response to temporary drops in training readiness, with the goal to enhance recovery and prepare the athlete for subsequent training. A taper is usually applied using a step or progressive approach, while a deload is typically implemented using a step approach with a single sudden and non-progressive decrease in training relative to the previous training phase, occurring at the beginning of the deload phase. So now that we've clarified how deloading compares to training cessation and tapering, let's turn to some practical recommendations for how to implement deloads effectively. These come from an article published in the Strength and Conditioning Journal titled A Practical Approach to Deloading, Recommendations and Considerations for Strength and Physique Sports by Lee Bell and colleagues. This is Talking Sports Science with a summary of their deloading recommendations. First of all, regarding training volume should be reduced relative to the previous training block, with reductions based on the athlete's recovery needs. For low recovery needs, reduce volume by about 25 to 45% or less. For moderate recovery needs, it's recommended to reduce volume by 40 to 60%. And for high recovery needs, volume should be reduced by approximately 60 to 90%. This reduction can be achieved by lowering the number of repetitions per set, decreasing the number of sets per session, or reducing volume in specific exercises or removing accessory movements. Regarding training frequency, this usually remains the same, unless the athlete is extremely fatigued. In such cases, frequency may be reduced, and may be preceded by short-term training cessation to help manage overall load. Moving on to training intensity, a decrease in absolute or relative intensity should be achieved through a decrease in percentage of rep max by approximately 10%, while keeping the number of repetitions the same. Intensity can also be managed by reducing the number of sets or increasing the repetitions in reserve. This involves performing fewer repetitions while maintaining the same absolute load, typically working at 1 to 3 repetitions in reserve. By doing so, increases the proximity to muscular failure. Ultimately, a reduction in intensity can be implemented in isolation or in combination with changes to both absolute and relative load. Moving on to exercise selection, during a deload it's recommended to place more emphasis on technical execution and reduce accessory work. Athletes may vary exercises to help avoid burnout or monotony. Deloading is also a chance to explore alternative resistance training strategies like bodyweight exercises, resistance bands, blood flow restriction, or isometrics. Typically, some sport-specific exercises, or their derivatives, will remain in the program. Consequently, for physique athletes, they typically have more flexibility in exercise choice compared to strength athletes. And regarding deload duration and periodicity, pre-planned or structured deloads typically last 5 to 7 days, although the exact duration depends on the length and intensity of the preceding training block. For example, for longer or more challenging training blocks, a longer deload may be needed. In some cases, this may include 2 to 5 days of complete training cessation to allow for full recovery. In terms of periodicity, pre-planned deloads are usually implemented every 4 to 8 weeks to proactively manage fatigue and support long-term training progression. Autoregulated deloads, on the other hand, are based on the athlete's current physiological or psychological state and may last as little as a single training session. These lighter days are introduced as needed, using both objective and subjective measures. This flexible approach helps adjust training in response to real-life factors like illness, travel, or elevated stress. And that concludes this overview of the deloading recommendations by Lee, Bell and colleagues. As always, it's recommended to go and check out the full article. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, folks. See you next time.